I've got news for you. Yesterday from 4 till 5 p.m., after I had taped my show yesterday, I sat in on an emergency court hearing in the matter of Rebel News versus David Lametti, the former Trudeau Justice Minister. It's a lawsuit that we filed, if you can believe it, on Saturday. And we served it on the government on Sunday, and we had an emergency first hearing called a case management hearing on Monday at 4 p.m. That's moving pretty quickly, if you ask me. I didn't even know you could file things like that on a weekend. The judge was a pretty senior guy. Justice Simon Fothergill is his name. He said he hadn't had the chance to read all the material that we had filed, but his purpose yesterday was limited to putting things on a schedule to manage the case, as they say. And the main thing we were looking for was an emergency order to preserve the government records in Lametti's possession. I'll tell you how that went in a moment, but please let me give you a proper update on the background, because it's really happened so quickly. I want to make sure you understand why we're doing what we're doing, why it's important. More is happening every day, it seems. So give me just 5 minutes to refresh your memory about why we're doing this. Last week was a disaster for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. In a stunning, unequivocal, devastating court ruling, the Federal Court of Canada goes through the Emergencies Act and how it was invoked by Trudeau 2 years ago to stop the truckers and how it was used, and clearly ruled that what Trudeau did was illegal. Canada was actually not at risk of serious violence in the nature of a revolution or an invasion or something on an existential level like that, which is necessary for the invocation of martial law. Current authorities have enough power in existing laws to deal with any problems, and those problems were, to be clear, horn honking and some traffic and parking violations. There was no violence. There was no insurrection. They didn't even really get out of their trucks. It was no January 6th moment, though Trudeau really wished it was. The bridge between Windsor and Detroit was blocked for, a day. Regular police cleared it without an incident. The border between Coutts, Alberta and Sweetgrass, Montana was blocked for a few days, but it too was ended without incident. Both of those were resolved before the invocation of martial law, which obviously proves that martial law was not needed, which is one of the requirements for the Emergencies Act. Here, let me read to you Section 3 of the Emergencies Act, just so you can see with your own eyes the law that Trudeau clearly broke. I'm just going to quote the law. It's in plain English. National emergency. For the purposes of this act, a national emergency is an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that A, seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, and is of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it. That didn't happen. Or B, seriously threatens the ability of the government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada, and that cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada. That's all you need to know. Pretty clear Trudeau didn't meet either of those tests. Trudeau, as usual, is a coward when the crunch comes. When the truckers came to Ottawa 2 years ago, Trudeau claimed he had COVID and went into hiding. Last week, when the federal court issued its ruling, he went into hiding again, sending out Chrystia Freeland to take the heat for it. She said the government was going to appeal this ruling. Good luck with that. But the world saw what happened. No wonder Trudeau is at an all-time low in the polls. No one believes him on anything anymore. By the way, even his own base hates him. I think he has two bases left politically. He's got journalists and civil servants, I guess, same thing. And then he has pro-Hamas voters. Did you see this clip? Apparently this is outside a mosque in Montreal that he was visiting, of course. And when he came out, even mosque members hate him. No wonder he takes in as many foreign trips as he can. Canadians of all stripes love them. He just likes to go to Jamaica. Here, remember this clip?
Shame, shame, Trudeau! Shame, shame, Trudeau! Shame, shame, Trudeau! Shame on you! 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 Get out of here! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
cowards! You guys are cowards! You guys are cowards!
By the way, the RCMP arrested and assaulted David Menzies for less than those people did to Trudeau there. Of course, it's the Prime Minister's job to decide whether or not to invoke the Emergencies Act. So it's a momentous decision, really akin to declaring war on your own people. Would be one of the most grave decisions a government could possibly make. He would be advised by different people, by police, by the military, by national security advisors, but at the end of the day, it would be the Prime Minister's chief legal officer who would assess the law and ensure the government acted accordingly, and he would give advice to Trudeau, go or don't go. And that advisor, that lawyer, is David Lametti, the Justice Minister at the time. He's the one who was supposed to look at the Emergencies Act and said, yeah, that horn honking is loud and those truckers are embarrassing my partisan team, so I'm going to ring a martial law alarm that has never been rung before, not even on 9/11. I'm going to break the glass and call 911. It's the worst thing that has ever happened to Canada, this horn honking. And what's the line from the law? Seriously threatens the ability of the government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada. What was it, the bouncy castles that did it, or was it the hot tub that did it? And David Lametti said, yeah, sure, boss, no problem. We'll just use this very special law that's never been used before. If you recall 2 years ago, Lametti claimed he had a secret legal opinion, he wouldn't tell us who wrote it, that justified invoking martial law. Sure, he does. You bet he does. It's secret. He won't show us, but it's the proof that he should have done what he did. It's like that old American joke from 100 movies and TV sitcoms. Oh, yeah, I have a girlfriend. You just don't know her because she goes to a different high school in Canada.
She lives in Canada. Met her at Niagara Falls. You wouldn't know her.
Yeah, so David Lametti's a liar. Trudeau fired him a few months ago, even though he lied for Trudeau. He did what Trudeau wanted. He fired him from cabinet, but he still stuck around as an MP. But right after the federal court ruling last week, he finally announced he was resigning. Good riddance. And going to a liberal-connected law firm called Fasken Martineau. Here's what they tweeted. Honored to welcome Mr. David Lametti, former Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada, to Fasken as counsel, a dedicated advocate for Indigenous reconciliation. He's also deeply engaged in emerging technology, particularly artificial intelligence. Yeah, he's so into Indigenous reconciliation, he stole the Justice Minister's job away from the first Indigenous Justice Minister in history, Jody Wilson-Raybould, because he was willing to interfere in court cases for Trudeau, but she wasn't. But I'm glad to learn that he's interested in artificial intelligence because I don't think he's shown a lot of natural intelligence, do you? As you know, as he was skulking away, as he quit Parliament, he thought he would do one last disgraceful act and destroy all of his official state records on Twitter by pressing delete on his government Twitter account. I've been down this Twitter road before. I'm not sure if it's something to brag about, but I think I've sued more politicians for misconduct on Twitter than anyone else in Canada. The main lawsuit was against Stephen Guilbeault, the execrable environment minister, that shifty little criminal. He's a convicted criminal, as you know, because he blocked Rebel News on Twitter, thus denying our reporters access to important government announcements, as well as our ability to interact with the minister and other Twitter followers. And here's the key point of why I mentioned that lawsuit that ended in Guilbeault's abject surrender and this consent agreement. He agreed never to block us again for the rest of his career. He agreed to pay us $20,000 in court costs, even though he forced taxpayers to pay that for him. But here's the key point. For 2 years, Stephen Guilbeault and the government of Canada's lawyers argued that Guilbeault could block whomever he wanted from his government Twitter account because it was actually his own private personal property, they claimed. That's what they argued for 2 years, even though his Twitter account had that official gray check mark that comes from being a verified government account. And more obviously, it was run by 24 civil servants using taxpayers' resources. So if that was the government's position for 2 full years, argued loudly and proudly in court, how on earth could we possibly trust David Lametti not to destroy government records pertaining to his role as Justice Minister, especially and importantly, right as the federal court ruled that the Emergencies Act invocation was illegal, and thus opening up the government and Lametti to hundreds of lawsuits from people who had their bank accounts frozen? So we had this hearing yesterday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, as I mentioned in my emergency live stream yesterday, a couple hours before that. Lametti had reinstated his Twitter account in response to our lawsuit, which is incredible when you think about it. He didn't fight. He didn't defend what he did. We just caught him with his hand in the cookie jar. He said, "Oh, you got me." Before he even spoke to us, he reinstated it, which is pretty incredible when you think about it, how hard Guilbeault fought for 2 years. But like I say, who could trust a liberal politician? Would you trust David Lametti for anything? If he said it was raining, I would go outside to check. I wouldn't believe him. Especially a liberal as slippery as Lametti, who was willing to sell out the whole country. We need a court order ensuring that he doesn't take it down again tomorrow or next week or next year, and to make sure that he doesn't go in selectively delete anything, including private direct messages to other cabinet ministers that we haven't even been allowed to see yet. Those private messages may well come out during the lawsuits that are bound to be filed against Lametti. So the hearing yesterday was almost an hour long, and it was interesting because it was only about whether or not the court would move on an emergency basis to grant a temporary order freezing the Twitter account until we have time to have a proper legal battle in court on the substance of it. And the judge yesterday was certainly open to the idea, at least that's how it seemed to me. He said, though, that he wanted to give Lametti a few more days to hire a personal lawyer, not just the government lawyer who was standing in yesterday, but if you've seen our lawsuit at stopthecoverup.com, you know that the two plaintiffs are me and Rebel News, and the two defendants are Lametti himself and Lametti as representative of the government of Canada. So he needs a personal lawyer too. So Lametti says he hasn't had a chance to get a personal lawyer yet. So the judge is giving him until Friday at 4 p.m., at which time we'll have another case management hearing. This is, how lawyers, this is welcome to lawyering. The government lawyer tried to argue that no interim injunction is necessary now, no special court order freezing things, because look, they've already complied voluntarily already. And I suppose in one sense it's true, but of course, that could change in a heartbeat. I don't trust the Liberals, and I don't think you do either. I don't think many people do. But it was exciting, and it was encouraging, and it was affirming to know a few things. Here, I made a short list. Number one, we made Lametti blink. We made him reinstate his Twitter account, or at least it looks that way. Number two, we made a judge take this seriously enough that he's having case management hearings about it, including scheduling another one quickly for Friday. Number three, it really looks like either through a trial and a judgment, or what's called a consent order, where the bad guys just agree to a kind of plea bargain, looks like Lametti actually might just agree to everything we're asking for in regards to his Twitter account. I mean, we caught him red-handed. Now, there are some other things we're asking for in the lawsuit, but the Twitter thing was the main thing, the thing that got us going. Of course, all this is important, number four, because no politician should be allowed to destroy public records. I mean, you'd hope they would follow the law, because the public ought to be able to see the public records of a cabinet minister, and because anyone who needs access to those records for lawsuits or other reasons ought to be able to get them in the future through the normal processes, including the hundreds of pending lawsuits. It's wrong for someone to destroy records. It's against the law too, by the way. So we'll see how this all goes. I'm full of confidence. We've beaten 4 other cabinet ministers in our Twitter lawsuits already. I'm happy to fight a 5th. I think we've got a winning team of lawyers, and we've got an open-minded judge. I feel like we're actually really doing things in the public interest, things that should be done, but no one else thought to do it. And if they thought to do it, they didn't quite know how to do it. And even if they knew how to do it, they couldn't do it for whatever reason. We had the idea. We had the lawyers led by Chad Williamson. We had the viewers to support the campaign through crowdfunding. I feel like we made a real difference. Let me show you this tweet by Ryan O'Connor, a freedom-oriented lawyer in the Greater Toronto area. He says, "Fascinating to return to former Attorney General David Lametti's posts about the Emergencies Act from 2022, during which he insisted that his invocation of the act respected the Charter, after the federal court held last week that some emergency orders were unconstitutional." And you can see that he has a thread of tweets. Ryan O'Connor's a good guy. He goes through Lametti's statements from 2 years ago about the Emergencies Act and compares them immediately with the lawsuit. Don't you think that's an important exercise to compare what Lametti said to what the court said? And look at O'Connor's last tweet in that interesting thread. This made me feel good. He said, postscript, you'll note that David Lametti's Twitter account has been resurrected. This was a direct response to an urgent lawsuit which Rebel News brought last weekend in Rebel versus Lametti, and is an important temporary win for government transparency. Exactly. It is an important temporary win, and we're looking to make it a permanent win, either in a plea deal with Lametti called a consent order, or by smashing away at him in the court for 2 years, which I sort of want to do, which is what we did with Stephen Guilbeault. I'm just not sure that David Lametti, who wants to skulk away to a private law firm and be done with Parliament, I'm just not sure he wants a 2-year legal battle hanging over him. I think there's a real chance he'll just sign the plea bargain, take a consent order like his fellow Twitter lawbreakers, and move on and never show his face in public again. What a disgraceful way for a disgraceful minister to end a disgraceful public career. I have to wonder if it was worth it for him. I'm proud that Rebel News, with the support of our viewers, was able to make a difference. I think we really did. Hey, can you imagine? We haven't even got the legal bill for the lawsuit yet. And it's not going to be light. 3 of our lawyers worked on it all weekend. If you want to help us out, because we're not done yet, by the way, we got this hearing on Friday, please go to stopthecoverup.com, because that's exactly what we're doing. Stay with us for more.